But just take a look at this.
So here we finally are, about 3 days out from the release of the 2025 Alone in the Dark. But how do the past 30 years worth of games rank up? Well, I'm going to tell you, because I have the only accurate ranked list of 6 on the interwebs. So sit back, relax, grab your favorite Lovecraftian short story, and maybe a beer, and listen to what amounts to my own personal opinion. Please feel free to freak out in the comments about it.
When you see half a dozen bees, just a buzzing, gotta count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Alright, number 6 is Illumination, and everybody knows why. It was just a Hail Mary pass by Atari to try to cash in on things like Back 4 Blood and Left 4 Dead and try to get this franchise back on the map. But honestly, the only thing it's got going on is this girl dancing around her booty shorts. So there's no contest. Number 6 is Illumination. Can be summed up with one noise. That's right, kids. Once you're out of ammo, there's no melee combat. Whether you agree with me or not, New Nightmare is the worst game except for Illumination. Why? Because they didn't care about who Edward Carnby was. Edward Carnby was a scrappy brawler who could kill a zombie with a headbutt or a soda straw. This game makes him basically a chimera of 90s coolness. Some emo kid with his Neo leather jacket that you see at a 2001 My Chemical Romance concert. Taking this game out of the New Orleans setting and the early 1920s America really made the setting bland and forgettable and dated. It didn't do anything that every other survival horror game had already done before it. Look, a sewer level. No survival horror game has ever done a sewer level. I know it is a good, solid survival horror game. If you change the name to just about anything else, it would be a solid survival horror game. But as an Alone in the Dark game, it was a total betrayal to the character and setting that made the entire franchise iconic.
The number of the day is 4.
Number 4 is Alone in the Dark 2008. How can I take this crazy mess of just weird ideas and bad story and throw it above New Nightmare? Simply, look at this scene. What is Carnby doing? He's fighting a bunch of zombies with a rake. Why? Because Carnby is a badass brawler. This game was a mess, yes, but it had a beautiful soundtrack and it cared a little bit who the character was. It tried to make him crafty. Sure, the inventory system was a mess and the crafting system was odd, but it still tried to make it connected to the original series. It still cared about who the character was, what the setting once was, and it just tried to do something different instead of being this kind of forgettable, bland thing that just slipped amongst every other survival horror game available at the time.
3.
Number 3, Alone in the Dark 3. This one I'm just gonna kind of do a candid rant on because I really don't know what to say about this one. It sits in the smack middle because that's kind of where it belongs. It's an odd one. It's almost as off the wall as Alone in the Dark 2008. It has werewolves, it has aliens, it has mech steam mech punk things walking around in this end sequence. It has Carnby turning into a cougar and being resurrected by Native Americans and coming back from the dead. It tries to be a damsel in distress story. It tries to be a 1920s movie real story. It tries to cover all these different bases. There's dwarves that do propeller dances. So it's a very kind of oddball last Hail Mary attempt at this series finding an identity before it kind of fell off the map and we got the New Nightmare as the reboot a few years down the road. I like this game. I don't like it as much as the two that are remaining. I think the story is very, very weak. You have this villain who, much like the villain in Part 5, just shows up conveniently here and there. And it just doesn't really go anywhere. It's just kind of a mess of ideas that sort of fit together into a story, but you have a very, very weak, meaningless antagonist. You have Emily Hartwood reduced to a damsel in distress, which is fine, but that plot isn't even done to its spaghetti western extreme either. There's no untying Emily from the railroad tracks or really any magnitude to her being kidnapped. She's just there so we can kind of say, oh look, there's Emily Hartwood, she was in the first game, and she just kind of walks around sadly until she's rescued. All she does is kind of pull a lever to get you out of a jam at one point. Yay, Emily. So there's not too much I could say about this one. It rounded the combat out. It tried to fix a few things. It added some new technology and some new cutscenes and stuff, but it's still kind of just bat poop crazy in its story and ideas, and I really don't even know what to make of it. It's a lot of fun. I still play through it every now and again. I think it's better than the ones I've ranked it above, but I don't think it was really well thought out either.
Who does number 2 work for? Who does number 2 work for?
That's right, buddy. You show that turd who's boss.
The number 2 spot, of course, belongs to the original classic. This game gave us fixed camera angles. This game gave us atmospheric horror. This game gave us a way to explore a dark and creepy mansion that had never been seen before. This game gave us many of the rules, like limited ammunition, jump scares, atmospheric sound, dynamic lighting, and a whole other host of conventions that we still use today in survival horror. Pretty much everything that Capcom would do later on in the Resident Evil series. So why not the number 1 spot? Well, this game did do a boatload of inventory management. You had a really bunko unseen weight system that had you spend a lot of the time just trying to dump items on the floor or tossing them, as we saw here. This game also suffers from a bit of the developers gotcha moments that I hate, where it's just trial and error, whether it's a crack in the floor that falls through for insta-death, or these mirrors which if you take a hit, the mirror can be cracked and the puzzle can leave you in a state of soft lock where you can't complete the game. There's just too many of these things that were still left over from the 1990s Sierra-style unwinnable state adventure games, where death was just an amusing thing for the developers to do to the player over and over again. So with too much trial and error and an ending that kind of goes a little bit off the rails and forces us to do some late game platforming and other various maze running, there is no lower form of gameplay than maze running. And this game definitely tries to pad the runtime But other than the climax, this game is just brilliant, all in all around. It's everything that survival horror would become, and it's one of the first 3 games pre-Resident Evil that really starts nailing down this formula to a T. There's no way to deny that without Alone in the Dark, Resident Evil would look very, very, very different. It deserves its spot at the top.
There can be only one.
The number 1 spot goes to Alone in the Dark 2, and unapologetically so. I understand it loses the Lovecraftian atmosphere, but that's not really a criticism, nor should it be. It took a greater emphasis on action, and I know a lot of people don't like the combat. However, it was 1993, and it was one of the first fully fleshed third-person fixed camera angle shooters, so it did a great job for its time. Before 1993, we didn't see games like Blood Rain or Tomb Raider. All of that would come after this game. Aside from that, it also has the best story. The story and the love between One-Eyed Jack and Elizabeth is almost relatable. They are the antagonists. They are going to kidnap and essentially murder with magic a 12-year-old girl to continue their immortality. But everything about their motivation makes sense. It's very much a love story between Elizabeth and One-Eyed Jack. We can understand where they're coming from. Every other antagonist in the series is either just separated by cosmic horror or just kind of boops in and out of the plot when necessary and doesn't really give us any motivation. They're just kind of there. Crowley, Jedstone, whoever New Nightmare has, it's just a mess. But this story is really relatable. The Flying Dutchman, it is much better than whatever Gore Verbinski came up with and all that pirates crap that you couldn't follow. It's a very simple, relatable story. Almost has shades of Goonies with the cavern closing in on the pirate ship. It's just quite simply, One-Eyed Jack rescues her. She's relatable because she's been abused. They fall in love and she makes a pact to make him immortal. This is a great story. We understand our antagonists, but we still have to oppose them anyway because they've kidnapped a 12-year-old girl. So we understand Carnby's motivation, we understand Jack's motivation, and we see them meet on the chessboard again and again throughout the game. It's well crafted. It makes sense. The other complaint that I get tired of hearing about this game is the focus on combat and the shift to action. I kind of embrace the fact that Carnby was going to go on a series of different adventures in this time period, and that all of them wouldn't be straight horror. Firstly. Second of all, as I said before, in this era, there wasn't a lot of third-person action. This was new and cutting. I still also find it pretty easy to work through this combat, even today. Sure, it's aged bad if you've only played Call of Duty, but if you have a respect for the genre, this still did an amazing job with what it had. Third, when do we ever criticize a survival horror series' most action-oriented entry? Seems like some other series did that at one point, didn't they?
I'm sure you boys didn't just tag along so we could sing Kumbaya together at some Boy Scout bonfire. But then again, maybe you did.
Even if you think the game had too much combat, it also offered several alternate ways to play the game. By solving puzzles, you could come up with ways to insta-kill enemies. It also showed who Carnby was. He was crafty and he was ruthless. He wasn't above poisoning his enemies with a bottle of wine or using explosives from above to kill them in cold blood. Carnby was willing to do whatever it took to get the job done and save Grace, and this spoke to his character. There was many ways to kill an enemy, not just by bullets, but by pure wit. The game's conclusion also delivers as well. It's the only game in the series where you actually get to square off against the antagonist in a very satisfying duel. While I do concede the game loses something by not having the thick Lovecraftian atmosphere of its predecessor, there's just something that resonates with me with this story. It feels more complete. We get to know our antagonists through and through. We get to hear Elizabeth's tragic backstory, and we kind of feel for her. We kind of feel like Jack was her savior and she wanted to give him something. Unfortunately, that something requires the death of a 12-year-old girl, and we can't have that. So, for all intents and purposes, we are the hero and Jack is the villain. But I love the morally grayness to the antagonist and how he interacts with the protagonist. It tells us a lot about Carnby's ruthlessness, and it tells us a lot about Jack. We never get this again anywhere else in the saga. There's just something dark and brooding and beautiful about the way the story plays out. The game has so many different ways to play it, so many secrets, so many different paths, parts you can skip, enemies you can kill in different ways, and it has something for everyone. But most importantly, there is something haunting about their romance and the tragicness to them being the villains. Alright, if you're actually still watching at this point, I appreciate you wasting your time on me. This is just my personal heartfelt opinion. It's very much autobiographical and how I grew up with the series. And I think everybody's opinion is valid on how to rank these things, so let me know in the comments why I'm an idiot. I appreciate you taking the time. Everyone enjoy the newest entry to Alone in the Dark this week, and let me know what you think of that as well. Have a good rest of your day, and thank you.